Welcome to the National Arts Club NAC at Home program. My name is Angela Louie. I am co-chair of the Fashion Committee and on the Board of Governors at the National Arts Club. It's very nice to see all of you here. For those who are unfamiliar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts, and to educate the American people in the fine arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical and musical performances, lectures, and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Today, we talk about all things scent related. It is such a big part of our lives. It is so interwoven with our other senses, and yet it's not very well understood. This is why I'm so honored to introduce our lovely, extraordinarily knowledgeable, and distinct guest today, Sue Phillips. Sue Phillips is a globally recognized fragrance expert, having created fragrance brands for iconic companies such as Tiffany, Burberry, Lancaster's, and others, as well as many top celebrities such as Jamie Foxx, Katie Holmes, and Zendaya. She is an adjunct professor at fragrance development and has taught at LIM College and FIT. With a mission to lift fragrance out of the bottle and to create magical scent experiences, Sue created Scenterprises to share her passion and knowledge of scents and perfumes. Her book, The Power of Perfume: How to Choose It, Wear It, and Enjoy It, is available for pre-order tonight through the link in the chat box and will be available to be shipped in a couple of weeks. Welcome, Sue.
There we go. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's so nice to see you.
It's so lovely to see you. And I will tell you that I'm so sad that we're not at the beautiful National Arts Club, but it's just wonderful to see you here. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity, Angela.
Well,
I think this is about a year in the making, right?
Yeah, at least a year in the making. I know that we had plans to do this program in person with everyone, but
Right.
this is good to do it this way, and we can certainly see each other in the club soon again. I guess I wanted to first talk about your passion for fragrance. I guess the first question we have is how you came to be a fragrance expert.
Well, actually, quite by chance, because I had grown up in South Africa. My mother was an amazing artist and calligraphist and musician. And so I always had the arts around me and I was surrounded by it. And when I came to America, I wanted to be a singer and an actress because that's what I had always studied to be. But because I didn't have my green card at the time or my membership to the unions, I landed up working for immigration attorney and eventually got my green card. And so a headhunter, when I spoke to them, they said, well, you're great in front of people, you'd be wonderful in training. And I said, well, what's training? And they said, you train the people behind the counter, the beauty advisors about fragrance. So I landed up going to the fragrance houses, getting an orientation, learning about fragrance. And I'll never forget, there was a gentleman called Jim Morton, and this is really a great testimony to him. He was the licensee guru for Chloe Lagerfeld and a wonderful big guy. And I spent a day with him learning about fragrance. And he said to me, Sue, I want you to become a fragrance expert. I said, Jim, how do I do that? He said, you'll become a fragrance expert. And I never forget those words ringing in my head. So I never trained to be a fragrance expert, although in a way, over the last 40 years, I have trained. So I've always loved fragrance. I love the arts. I love how fragrance makes you feel. It makes you feel uplifted. It can change your mood and change your emotions. It can recall memories and emotions. And when you're feeling down, you just put on a wonderful fragrance and spray it, and it could immediately transport you to somewhere else or uplift you. So I have become absolutely passionate. In fact, I cannot leave home without my fragrance.
What a great story. In fact, I think of this the saying where the saying of how you didn't choose the fragrance life chose you.
Yes.
Um, Now let's talk about this lovely book. How did you arrive at the idea of writing this exquisite book, and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Well, I love to write. And over the years, I have written so many articles for so many different magazines. I was the sort of a guest editor for Glow magazine as the beauty editor. Um, I have written tons of articles and so on. And, I just thought, what's next? I think one always thinks about being an expert if you have something to really talk about, a book, a series, or whatever. And I just thought finally it's time. And I started to write it just before the pandemic. Actually, yes, it was going to be ready, I think, in May, and then the pandemic hit and everything sort of was delayed. So it's an homage in a way to the fragrance industry that has been so good to me, and I have loved every minute of it. And it's a way of really taking a trip down memory lane and, you know, helping people understand what fragrance means. Because over the last many, many years of creating custom fragrances, I've had so many questions from clients and fragrance lovers about perfume and scent and aroma that I just decided to put something together. And really, I had different titles, but finally, The Power of Perfume beckoned me, and that's what it's called: How to Choose It, Wear It, and Enjoy It.
In a way, publishing it and releasing it now is very special because we are in such unique times where one of the most talked about symptoms of COVID-19 is the loss of the sense of smell. So, Sue, do you feel like there is this new awareness of the importance of scent and a new appreciation on the way it impacts our other senses?
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of my presentation slides. Angela, how many people have never thought about the importance of their sense of smell? People go along their daily lives and they go out for dinners and restaurants and so on, and they talk about the food and the ambiance and something tastes delicious, but they never think about how food and flavor are so connected. And it is absolutely awful when you lose your sense of smell because your socialization stops. People always say, let's meet for lunch or for breakfast, for dinner, and some wonderful occasion where there's a lot of food and a lot of, convivial atmosphere. And when people have lost their sense of smell and taste, they kind of retreat. They don't want to partake of socialization because they can't enjoy it. They can't sort of really add anything to the conversation. And so slowly and surely they start to retract from socialization, and it's devastating. And in fact, there have been studies where people who've lost their sense and smell pre-COVID, and this has been going on for years, way before we are, affected by COVID, with through viral problems, certain car accidents, where people have lost their sense of smell and they have literally become so depressed they opt out and they've passed away. So think about how important it is to have our sense of smell. And I always say we need to honor it.
Well, thank you so much, Sue, for putting through your book and through this presentation a spotlight on this topic. We are all ready and excited to learn about the history, the art, and the science of scent. Um, I'm going to ask you to take us through it and ask the audience to bear with us a few seconds while we get to that screen share.
Okay. All I want to say is that this is not a sort of a 5-hour historical retrospective, but it is a little trip down fragrance memory lane. And what I'll ask the audience to do is I'll ask you some questions. I'll ask you to put in the chat what your thoughts and your memories are about certain fragrances I bring up. So thank you, Angela. And I'm going to share my screen. and talk to you tonight about the art of scent. So here we are, and let me just get to my I have to just, oh, okay, there we go. So as we talked about, sense of smell is our most powerful sense. And as I talked about COVID, we know about people who have lost their sense of smell and taste. And the one thing that people might not know is scent triggers memory and emotions. And our sense of smell is so connected. Why? Because our limbic system, that's the ancient and very primitive part of the brain, is said to be the seat of emotion. So when you walk down the street and you smell something, it sort of sends a transmission to the impulses of the brain, and you can literally stop dead in your tracks because you smelled something that might have, you might recall a memory, a love, a newborn baby, some kind of an aroma or fragrance that literally triggers that emotion. So it's very, very powerful. And this has happened to me frequently. I can walk down the street, and at certain times of the year, spring and fall, the wind will change, and I suddenly smell something in the air that reminds me of my childhood in South Africa. And I literally just have this amazing recall. So it's really, really powerful. So a lot of people don't really realize how important our sense of smell is. This is a chart by Martin Lindstrom, who's written Brand Sense. And you can see that our sense of sight is our strongest, but our sense of smell is our most powerful. So the first is the strongest is sight, and then you have smell, and then going down the rest of the chart is sound, taste, and touch. And don't forget how taste and smell are so related. So I want to tell you a little bit about some of the main olfactory families, and you might realize why certain fragrances appeal to you and why certain don't, based on the fragrance family. So the first is the citrus, all those lovely light, bright citrusy notes, lemons, limes, bergamot, grapefruit, all those marvelous citrus notes and ingredients. Then we have the florals. Of course, everybody knows about florals: rose, jasmine, lily of the valley, gardenia. Fruity is a wonderful category, and a lot of young people like the fruity category because it's very young, it's very strawberry, the melons, the watermelons, the berries, they're just delicious, and they're sort of that whole very fresh and young category, which became very popular a few years ago when the Bath and Body Works companies started to put all those lovely sort of fruity notes out. The Oriental is a fragrance family that is really, if you go to your spice cabinet, you'll see all the spices right there: cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, even black pepper, all those lovely, spicy, exotic notes. And vanilla is actually considered a spice and is part of the Oriental family. And that's why we have these lovely vanilla beans and the orchid flower. The next category, which you might not know or be familiar with, is a category called Chypre. And take a look at the way it's spelled. It's spelled Chypres, which is based on the island of Cyprus. And I actually went to Cyprus because years ago, many perfumers traveled around the world looking for interesting ingredients. And when they got to the Mediterranean, the island of Cyprus, they said, "Ah, nous sommes en Chypre." And what they were smelling were these wonderful earthy, mossy, patchouli, leathery notes. So they gave the name of that category after the island of Cyprus, called Chypre. So when I went there with my daughter, I was so excited, but it's so built up. It's like a mini New York, and they sell little tiny bottles of the Chypre fragrance. So the next category is the woodsy, which is all the sandalwood, birchwood, cedarwood. And then you have the fougere, which are the lavender notes, and the rosemary, and all the herbaceous notes: lavender, rosemary, thyme, the ingredients that make you feel calming and relaxed. And then finally, the animalic. And although we don't do anything with perfumes from animals anymore, that was a huge category. Remember musk? Remember ambergris? So if you want to, in the chat, put down, and I'd love to hear from you and make this interactive, what are the categories that you feel you love? And I know that this is a little complicated, so I've made it a little easier for you by narrowing it down to 4 main olfactory groups: the fresh, the floral, the woodsy, and the spicy. So when I talk to clients and I ask them, what fragrances do they like and what kind of category, so many Americans say to me, oh, fresh and clean, fresh and clean. And I always like to say, well, what does fresh and clean mean to you? Fresh could be the smell of the ocean, could be the smell of a beautiful, crisp mountain air. It could be the smell of lemons or limes, those wonderful, bright, refreshing notes. So fresh, or the smell of rain, wonderful, fresh smell of rain. So there are a lot of ingredients and categories in here that are a little bit more complicated than just the fresh, the floral, the woodsy, the spicy, but it would be fun to hear about from you what of these, which olfactory groups and families mean to you. So I'd like to make this interactive. So hearing from you is wonderful. And then we'll take a look at we'll look at your comments. So I'm going to take you on a trip down memory lane, fragrance through the decades. And I'm going to start at 1910, and I'm going to take you on a brief fragrance journey and show you why certain fragrances were iconic and still are, and why they typified the decade. So again, if you want to put in the chat what you think about some of these fragrances, and if they do recall memories for you, please, let's hear from you. So in 1910, the Francois Coty launched the fragrance Chypre. Again, an homage to the island of Cyprus, which I told you about. It's a combination of the woods, the moss, the citrus, leather, and patchouli. It's deep, it's smoldering, it's very sensual. And it was a wonderful fragrance that really captivated Europe at the time. So the next one, and you can see this was also the fashion of the day. Sort of, I like to talk about how fragrance and the financial, political, economic, and social, political, and economic trends were really typified by certain fragrances. So, of course, we all know about Chanel No. 5. Did you know that Chanel No. 5 was launched in 1920? It has just celebrated its 100th anniversary. Think about how many fragrances have that amazing sort of honor of being popular for 100 years. It's changed over the years, but this word aldehydes was one of the first modern day ingredients used in perfumery with the florals. It was actually a molecule made of aldehydes, which is from alcohol and dehydrogenated carbon oil. And when Coco Chanel went to the perfumer and she wanted to make a fragrance, just the way you see all my fragrances in the back of me, she sat down with the perfumer Ernest Beau, and basically he created a fragrance for her because she said she wanted something fresh and very powdery and feminine and clean. And he came up with 8 different fragrances. And the 5th one she happened to love. And the 5th one had this aldehydic compound. It was a formula that he created made of the molecules as well as florals. And it was the 5th one. Her birthday is on the 5th of May. Her lucky number is number 5. So she chose the number 5. And when Ernest Beau went back to the perfumer in the lab, he says, Jacques, what did you do? You put too much aldehydic in the formula. By the way, it's been the most popular and the most successful fragrance of all time. So a little error sometimes goes a long way. The 1920s continued with a beautiful classic European fragrance with vanillin. Vanillin is an organic compound made basically from the vanilla bean. And this was a beautiful fragrance called Shalimar, which was a love story about the emperor of India who fell in love with his bride in the beautiful garden of Shalimar. So I'd love to know how many of you have worn or still wear Coco Chanel No. 5 and Shalimar, and if you do, what they mean to you. This might be a fragrance that you're not too familiar with. In the 1930s, this is a beautiful fragrance from Guerlain called Vol de Nuit, Night Flight. And this was a tribute to Amelia Earhart, who was the first woman aviator. So this was a one, and you can see the wheels of the aircraft captured in the bottle of the bottle on the packaging. So this was a lovely fragrance, not terribly familiar. You're not very familiar with a lot of it, but still popular. And of course, we all know about Miss Dior, the cinched in waists, the New Deal. And again, this was a modern cheaper. It has changed over the years, this Dior. There are several Dior incarnations of fragrance, but this was the classic from the 1940s. And you can also see some of the categories. Who remembers Youth Dew by Estee Lauder? This was actually a perfume bath oil, not a perfume, but it was so strong and so concentrated that women put it on their wrists and it lasted all day, sometimes 2 days. So this was an amazing fragrance, which really, I think, started the Estee Lauder company on its way by Estee Lauder herself. It was very distinctive bath oil. And you can see how it sort of emulated the fashion of the day, the new look with the cinched in waist. So you can see the packaging with the cinched in sort of middle of the bottle. And can you believe that Disneyland started in the 50s? The 60s, what would we be without the 60s and Twiggy and the hippies and Musk? And the first American designer was Norel. How many of you have ever worn Norel by Norel? So this was a very, very important fragrance from the American designer standpoint. And it was the first moon landing in 1969. So a lot happened in the 60s. The hippies, the Beatles, Twiggy, the moon landing, and the start of the fragrance category in the 1960s with the American designer. Okay, women striding with confidence down the roads. Charlie, the first lifestyle scent, really defined the decade with emancipated women really finding their independence. Bell bottoms were around. Diane von Furstenberg's wrap dress, platform heels. And think about this. That was the time that Microsoft was launched. Where would we be today without the, Microsoft? And as you can see in the next slide, next 2 slides after that, but how Microsoft has really changed our lives. And we'll talk about the rest later on. 1980s, do you know what happened in the 1980s? It really reflected the bold, flamboyant, decadent, wealthy socialization, the Dynasty TV show with the big hairdo, big shoulder pads, and the fragrance, of course, Georgia, Beverly Hills. A beautiful, bold, big pineapple fragrance, which was so recognizable. And do you know that the fragrance was banned from restaurants because it was so powerful and it really interfered with the food? So the restaurateurs decided to ban Georgia Beverly Hills, and it was actually written on the menu. Please do not wear Georgia Beverly Hills. That was probably another way it became so popular. So how many of you wore Georgia Beverly Hills? I'd love to hear from you. Let's put it in the chat. And then the 1980s, let's not forget about the whole androgyny aspect with Obsession for Men by Calvin Klein. So suddenly sexuality and sensuality became sort of de rigueur. Calvin Klein really stretched the boundaries with his Obsession fragrance. In fact, I think the TV ad was banned, but it started, and look at the advertising with all these beautiful naked bodies, not an extra pound on any of them. So very, very, very sensual fragrance. Obsession was oriental, spicy, warm, no longer the beautiful big pineapple fruity notes of the Georgia, but now coming to a little bit more sensual and sexy. The 90s totally sort of ran away from that. It became very minimalistic. The fragrance became very transparent, very aquatic. Those ozonic, lovely marine notes, those watery notes, those transparent notes. And in fact, people reflected, really denounced the whole idea of consumerism. They didn't want to wear their fancy designer logos, anything. Everything became very, very much more minimalistic. And this was the beginning of the World Wide Web as we know it today. Do you all remember L'eau d'ici, the water of Issy? So this was a very interesting fragrance, Angel. It was a beautiful fragrance, a total departure from the florals or the woodsy or the spicy. It was a gourmand edible note. It was the first gourmand edible note made from chocolate and caramel, candy floss. And Terry Mugler, when asked about his fragrance, recalled a memory of going to the fairgrounds with I think his mother or his grandmother, and she would give him candy floss and caramel candy and chocolates, and all those beautiful edible notes stayed with him all his life. And he wanted to create a fragrance as a tribute to his grandmother. And he loved her nail polish remover. So in this beautiful edible gourmand note, there's also a slight little bit of a sort of not as spicy so much, but a little bit of the acetone, the nail polish remover, because that's what he associated with her. So again, you can see how fragrance is really triggering memories and emotions, and this fragrance really reflected Terry Mugler's childhood memories. The bottle was so beautiful. It was really thought of as a sculpture and too beautiful to throw away. So the company came up with a very innovative idea at the counter. So women would bring their fragrance bottles and they didn't want to lose them. So they would actually dram the fragrance that would be to decant the fragrance into these beautiful bottles. So it would be a collectible. And Terry Mugler, as we know, has broken barriers in fashion and of course now in fragrance. And then we started with the 1980s to 2000, the whole idea of celebrity fragrances. Liz Taylor was the first with Passion, followed by Diamonds, White Diamonds. And J.Lo is still launching, and I'll show you her in a little bit. But the whole idea of celebrity fragrances launched, and every single celebrity has come up with fragrances, men and women, over the last 20 years or so. At the time of the millennial, there was a whole resurgence of back to vintage classic fragrances. The whole idea of nostalgia and a remembrance of things past came to be. And of course, what were the most classic fragrances of yesteryear? They were the classics, the Chanels and the Shalimars, and even a fragrance called Arpège. I don't know if you remember that. So that was sort of the 2000s. And now suddenly, after so many thousands of fragrances being launched over the years with celebrity fragrances and designer fragrances, suddenly the word bespoke came to be. And a lot of Americans didn't know what bespoke meant. It was actually a term used by the British for clothing, mostly for men, as in, I want to wear a particular suit made for me. And the term bespoke reflected and related to clothing. And ultimately, bespoke became known as customization. And so customization has been so very, very popular in the last 10 years or so, or 15 years. So I always say, why wear what everybody else when you can create your own? And so a whole new category emerged, the idea of personalization. And I started my custom fragrance business 12 years ago. And there have been a lot of companies who have now followed suit, who are all doing customization. And today, with the internet and with social media and YouTube, everybody is a brand. So there are thousands and thousands of fragrances being launched all the time. And if you wanted to know the volume of the global perfume market, it is really growing, believe it or not. In 2020, it was just about 34 billion, up almost 7 or 8% over 2019. Sales are projected for 2020 to 2025 at about 44 billion. And looks like, oh, this is a typo, this should be 54 million. Oh, excuse me. Which leads us to why I'm here today. talking about my book, and I'm so excited to tell you about the power of perfume, how to wear it, choose it, and enjoy it. And I'm excited to show it to you and share it to you. And there's some wonderful tributes and testimonials, but I hope you enjoyed our fragrance journey, and I hope you learned a little bit. And I would love to know what your thoughts are about some of the fragrances I highlighted. So, Angela.
Fantastic. Terrific. Thank you. And that's all of the information for Sue. You can also purchase the book in the chat link below.
And now I'm going to stop my screen sharing and join you again in virtual reality. So I hope you enjoyed this, everybody.
Well,
I haven't seen the comments, but I'm sure I will later on. I just want you to all know that I'm so grateful to all of the participants here tonight. I understand that there are about 705 people that there were about an hour ago when I spoke to Angela. So for all you fragrance lovers, thank you for coming on. And you're amidst a wonderful array of fragrance lovers. So I'm delighted to talk to, even though I can't see you all, I'm so excited that you're all here. So thank you, and let us hear from you.
Well, I want to say thank you for a fantastic presentation. It was filled with so much information about, we went through the history a little bit, the science of scent, and clearly from the activity in the chat box, this is a very, very popular topic. Just a reminder, Sue's book, The Power of Perfume, How to Choose It, Wear It, and Enjoy It, is available for pre-order through the link in the chat box, and it will be available to be shipped in a couple of weeks. I also noticed in the chat box that Jeffrey Banks wanted to offer an interesting fact. Norel, created by Revlon for Norman Norel, was created by a female nose, which was very unusual for its time. So thank you, Jeffrey. So
thank you, Jeffrey, for saying that. And actually, my friend Don Loftus, who I have known for many years, was the president of a company called Parlux, who introduced the fragrance Norel.
Wonderful. Great. So I wanted to start with this first question, which is,
yes.
So can you tell us the right way to wear perfume? I noticed people spray it on their neck, on their wrist, some spray it in the air and walk through it. What do you recommend?
Well, I love the story, and thank you for asking. I don't know who asked the question, but I will tell you that. So I used to go to Paris very often on business. And when I created the fragrance for Tiffany and then Burberry and Trish McAvoy, I met with all the perfumers in Paris. And one of the first encounters with a French perfumer was a wonderful perfumer. And she said to me, and she thought I was American. So sorry, Americans, I'm going to take a little bit of a swipe at Americans right now, and a swipe at French with my French accent. So she said, you Americans, you have no idea how to wear the perfume. She said, we in France, we have been wearing perfumes for centuries. We know that the fragrance rises as the body heat warms a perfume. And after all, you want to have the fragrance envelop you. So start to wear the fragrance from the bottom up, at the ankles or the feet. So when you have the long skirt swishing, the fragrance will waft up through the air. So at the ankles, behind the knees, in between the thighs, in the bosom area, at all the pulse points, and wherever you want to be kissed, she says. What does the Americans do? A spritz here and a spritz here. Who do they attract? The birds and the clouds. So where should you wear fragrance? Well, in winter, you don't want to waste your beautiful fragrance by wearing it on the ankles or the feet or so on, but fragrance is really meant to be worn on the warm pulse points. So at the wrists, in the crook of the arm. You know, when you go to the doctor, they take your pulse because that's where the pulse, the blood sort of comes to the surface. So at the wrists, at the pulse points, behind, at the nape of the neck. And some people say to wear fragrance on clothes. I do not recommend wearing fragrance on clothes. I do not recommend wearing perfume behind your neck, because women who have long hair, it's a little bit of a place where you might perspire. So you don't want to have the fragrance distorted. On clean, unscented, moisturized skin, out of your shower, moisturize with a little unscented moisturizer, and then spray your fragrance over you, and it'll adhere to you, it'll last longer, and it'll envelop you and make you feel amazing. But not on the clothes and not on the hair. Your hair, they say spray it in the air and walk through it. Well, why would you want to spray a fragrance in the air that's going to, it's a very expensive fragrance where it's just going to dissipate and get distorted from through the shampoo and the conditioner. So that's my recommendation for wearing fragrance.
I think we're all going to remember those instructions with in our memory with you in a French accent. So thank you. So I noticed in the comment section that oftentimes people really enjoyed scent that wasn't overpowering. So how much should we wear perfume and cologne?
So what I should do is tell you the difference between perfume and cologne, because perfume and cologne and eau de parfum and they're all different concentrations. So think about this. Perfume is the strongest, most concentrated perfume. And if you take a perfume bottle, the perfume bottle, much like when, we mix salad dressing, you have the oil and the vinegar and the water and so on, 25 to 30% of the fragrance oil is in a perfume concentration formula. And then it's mixed with certain water and alcohol and sort of the proper alcohol, not just any kind of alcohol. But perfume has the most amount of formula ingredients in the perfume. And as it's diluted, it gets diluted with alcohol and water, and then it becomes eau de parfum. And the more it's diluted, the less concentrated it is. So the concentrations are perfume, eau de parfum, eau de toilette, eau de cologne, and then eau de toilette. And it's all a question of concentration. So the most concentrated is your perfume. The less concentrated are the eau de parfum, eau de toilette, and eau de cologne. And somebody asked, may you touch on the history of the name eau de toilette? I just saw that. Yes, I'll be happy to. So eau de toilette literally means the water for the toilet. For when women in France made their sort of their bathing rituals, and the French expression "ça faire la toilette" is to make your toilette, to prepare you for your cleansing, if you will. And so toilet water is the literal translation of eau de toilette. And that's where the word comes from. It's a French word, and it was part of the bathing ritual, and they used their toilet water for bathing. And then some people scented it, and that's basically how it became part of the fragrance category.
Thank you. That's very, very fascinating. I noticed in the comment section that oftentimes people loved the scent of a perfume, but later on it gave them headaches later on in life, or they loved something and someone wore it and it caused headaches. And for other scents, it doesn't cause any headaches. So I guess the question they're asking is, why would some other fragrance give them headaches and why would others not?
Great question. Thank you, whoever asked that. So again, I have to tell you, it's all about quality. Now, we all know about, and I will correlate it to champagne or wine. If you drink really good quality champagne, the best quality, you can have 5 or 6 or 7 glasses. You will never get a headache. You'll never get any sort of allergic reaction. You might get a little tipsy, but you won't get sort of that. The same is true for wines with all the sulfates. And the same is true for fragrances. You know, when in my presentations and in my book, I talk about how fragrances were created and why perfume was sort of started in Grasse and why the ingredients were so important. And it all had to do with the natural ingredients. And over the years, certain fragrance ingredients have now either been banned, or they're no longer able to be made, or they're discontinued. And so what happens is, fragrance is an art and a science. The art is knowing how to combine them. The science is knowing what to combine them with. And so because certain ingredients are no longer being able to be sourced or harvested, perfumers are very resourceful, and they try and recreate through headspace technology some of the ingredients that are found in nature but are no longer being able to be used. Some of those ingredients, sadly, do give headaches and allergies. And I will tell you honestly, I've been in the fragrance industry for 40 years. You're supposed to say, no way, Sue. But
No way, Sue.
but the truth is that I've never heard of more complaints of headaches and allergies than I have in the last 10 years. People who have come to me at my perfume studio, either at the Scenterprises or where I am now, said to me, I used to love a fragrance, but it's changed. I get headaches and allergies. Well, sadly, it's some of the ingredients are not the purest of ingredients, or they may be made synthetically. And sometimes synthetics can be wonderful, but synthetics also can give a sort of deleterious reaction because of the chemicals.
Thank you for that. We've got some people, a few people who wanted to ask you about, about Scenterprises, about your company. So the first thing they wanted to understand is how you begin to design a fragrance for an individual. What do you do? How do you arrive at what is good for this individual, and how do you arrive at that conclusion together?
Well, when I was in the corporate arena and I created fragrances for Tiffany and Burberry and Avon and all these big companies, we really looked at the brand ethos. What did the brand represent? Was it a luxury brand? Was it a casual brand? Was it for women, for men, or both? And so you start to look at the architecture of the brand and start to create it that way. And that's really how most people and most companies work. They want to create a fragrance. They find perfumers or companies who are doing it, and the perfumers then the companies are given a profile of everything I talked about: what the company is, the demographics, who it's for, what the target range, price range, and so on. So that is called a profile. So having known all this and learned all this, when I started my fragrance company, Scenterprises, I had left Tiffany to have my daughter, and I was creating fragrances for Burberry and Trish McEvoy and Avon and so on. And then in 2008, the financial collapse happened, and I said, what do? I have to do something. And I started thinking about the customization. And so what I've done at my perfume, with my bespoke perfume business, the profile that I give is a questionnaire to my clients, because I get calls all the time. I want to make a fragrance. I want to launch it at Macy's. I want to do it this, and I want to, but what is the sort of defining characteristic of that person, and how's it going to make that person feel? So I've developed a scent personality quiz, which is actually in the back of the book. You can take the scent personality quiz, and then you can send in your results, and I will evaluate it. And this is what I do. So knowing that, and I actually equated to the 4 fragrance families: the fresh, the floral, the woodsy, the spicy. And the different questions, once you tabulate it, determine whether the client prefers fresh or floral or citrus or woodsy. And it's really interesting. It is absolutely 100% accurate. I always have to say, well, I'll give 1 or 2 percentage points for being a little bit off, but it works for men and for women. And invariably, we're able to understand what they like. And then I take them on a fragrance journey. You can see all the bottles behind me. Those are my 18 blends. And I take them on a fragrance journey, and they evaluate all the different blends: the citrus, the musk, the green, the ozonic, the different flowers, rose, floral, gardenia. And at the end, they've taken 18 different fragrances, and they reject the ones that they don't like, and they take the ones that they love, and then they combine them. And ultimately, people create their own custom fragrance. And I've had so many amazing reactions and talk about fragrance and memory and emotion. I'll give you one example. A young woman who's a beautiful one, and I think she's in my book. I said, and the end of the fragrance journey, people find the name. They also come up and create their own name that they want to offer the fragrance. And so I said, well, what are you going to call your fragrance? She said, Nola B. And she was so emotional. I said, why are you so emotional? She said, this fragrance is just so beautiful. She said, it's reminding me of the time that I spent in New Orleans with my grandfather and the beautiful florals from New Orleans and Nola B. So she said, he was the man who actually trained Muhammad Ali and came up with the expression, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. And she said the fragrance was so beautiful and powerful, but soft. It was a powerful fragrance, but it also had the beautiful sort of lightness of the flying of the bee, not stinging like the bee, but flying. So she called her fragrance Nola Bee. And I thought that was such a great tribute, and she got very emotional. Another young woman, Sarah Priebus, who was the host on HQ Trivia, and it's all on my YouTube channel. You can see some of these YouTube videos. She got so emotional, and she said, Sue, I don't know why I'm getting so emotional. She said, but I'm going to call my fragrance gratitude because I'm so grateful for all the things I've done. It's just bringing up all this feeling of gratitude. So people really can reflect their individuality and their personality through fragrance and wearing their own fragrance and making it very, very meaningful for them.
Thank you for sharing that. That's such a lovely story. You know, we had a question come in while you were talking about people, identifying a specific scent that's right for them. Do you think that there is a scent that is more appropriate for the day and one that's appropriate to wear during the evening?
Well, I do think so, because I'm also looking at the comments. Some people say certain fragrances were too heavy and too. So typically, something for the daytime is usually you like to be sort of something fresh and sort of exhilarating, making you feel exuberant and refreshing, and getting back to the fresh and clean comments that most people like, men and women. And the other thing is that, we associate evening fragrances with being sophisticated and sensual and exotic and passionate. And some of the deeper, darker, more sensual ingredients like the ambers, the spicy notes, the deeper florals like gardenia, and the sensual woodsy notes are more appropriate for the evening. So, certain companies actually before COVID had banned people from wearing heavy perfumes because they didn't feel it reflected the right image for the company. So that is why some people actually wear lower concentration. They might use an eau de toilette, or they might use an eau de cologne or a body lotion or a bath gel for a fragrance that's not as heavy, but they still want to have their fragrance, their signature scent. So, what I would say is choose the fragrance you love to wear. But if it's going to give people sort of negative comments, oh, it's too strong, then either lighten it by maybe diluting it a little bit with maybe some, perfumer's alcohol, or getting a lighter version in a body lotion or a cream or that kind of thing. But yes, I do think just the way we wear different clothing for day and for night. You wouldn't wear a little black evening dress with sequins during the day. So, and you wouldn't wear casual, tennis shorts at night if you're going on a date. So I think being appropriate is important.
That makes perfect sense. We wanted to ask you about your thoughts on quality assurance. There was an audience member who tested certain brands in St. Bart's and noticed that they smelled better to this person than when she tested the same brands in the US. Have you noticed that too?
So there's something about, I'm looking at some of these comments. I love it. I'm going to read your comments. I'm loving them. So, certain fragrances, I would say that equates to certain fragrances in Europe, where you can have the same brand, but because it's made in Europe, it has the European water, the European alcohol. And so it's different than American water and American alcohol. And yes, there can definitely be a difference. You know, some people feel that made in France is much more important than anything made in America or China or you know, other areas. So I think you just have to really develop your sense of smell. And I think you have to uh, develop your sense of smell and know what the elements are that you happen to love, and then try and find them. Because if you feel that a French fragrance, and you find it at the duty-free airports, is literally from France, and you prefer the French version than an American version, hopefully, you know, you'll find it again and again. But there are differences, I have to say. I do think, though, that through regulation and through the different organizations and the different regulatory bodies, perfumers really do want to make a consistent fragrance, because we're living in a global world. You know, we're international, we travel where we used to, but we will travel again. That people will really want to find their same brand worldwide. Sadly, there are some ingredients that are banned by the EU that, you know, have been named as allergens, and they're no longer being able to be produced. And that's why certain ingredients fall the way of, you know, being discontinued.
So as a nose in the industry, can you recommend to someone a way to improve their own sense of smell?
I love this because I say to people, you know, this sounds silly, but when you go to the supermarket and you look at all those gorgeous citrus, you know, products, the lemon, the lime, the orange, the grapefruit, the tangerine, here's a great way to really try and build your sense of smell and your awareness. So when you look at a grapefruit and you smell it, you know what it smells like. And you look at an orange or a lemon or a lime. But now if you buy all those products and you put them on a table and you blindfold yourself and you pick up one of them, it's going to be very hard for you to distinguish whether it's a lemon or a lime or a bergamot or a tangerine or a grapefruit, because we're not using our sense of smell, and our sense of smell is our most powerful sense. So I say to people, please just pick up those products. You know, even think about peach, apricot, nectarine, how similar they are, but they all have a distinctive smell. So the next time you go to a supermarket, pick them up and see if you can identify them. And that's the way you can really enhance and sort of really heighten your sense of smell.
What would you say is a key difference in someone wearing essential oils for fragrance versus perfume?
So essential oils have the consistency of olive oil. So, you know, olive oil is very heavy, it's occlusive. So if you put olive oil on your skin, it's going to sort of leave a residue, and it's going to be there. It's not going to absorb into your skin, and it'll just be there. It's very heavy. The difference between sort of essential oils and fragrance, that even if it's a perfume, perfume does have alcohol in it, and the alcohol will lift the fragrance and it'll absorb into your skin. So if you have your olive oil and you put it on your skin, it'll stay there. But if you can actually spray your fragrance, and you'll see it'll, I don't know if you can see it through here, but it'll last for a little bit. It's not heavy, but you'll see very soon it's going to dry. Whoops, there you go. It's going to dry. And what will be left, the alcohol will lift off, and the beautiful fragrance ingredients will stay. So look, it's the liquid is gone, but I smell the beautiful fragrance, and it's not heavy and occlusive. So that's the difference.
Ah, thank you for that. We've all always wondered. You know, you'll see in the comments a lot of people talking about some of their favorite
I
perfumes.
I see
Are
that. I'm
very
trying to
popular.
find them.
Yeah, and in some of those comments, they're saddened that they've been discontinued, And so the question that we have for you, Sue, is do you have any insights on why a company might decide to change or stop making a certain perfume? Is it because of a response to declined sales, change of taste? Why might that be?
Well, several reasons. Sort of from a commercial standpoint, maybe the fragrance doesn't sell anymore. So, they discontinue it and they come up with a new one. And that's really where I came up with, somebody came up with the expression, flavor of the month, because every 5 minutes they were launching a new fragrance. Even these seasonal fragrances, fragrance for spring, for summer, for winter. Certainly, nobody wants to be in business to lose money. And the cost of launching a fragrance and developing it and marketing it is really very, very high. It's cost a lot of money. But then what happens is, tastes change. You can see in the presentation, every decade had a sort of iconic feel. And the 80s fragrances, which were very bold and exuberant, wouldn't have worked in the 1990s because that was really a much more sort of transparent. So it's also a question of the times, the political, the social, the economic trends. If fragrances are going to be popular and are going to be, generating revenue for the companies. If not every company is going to have a Chanel number 5, even though it's changed over the years, and somebody said Chanel number 5 was very heavy. I think that's why they came up with a lighter version to appeal to the existing Chanel customer, but also to answer the sort of questions of what's happening from a social, political, and economic standpoint. Trends change. So that's the reason. And then, of course, the other reason is certain ingredients are no longer being able to be used, animal ingredients. So musk comes from the deer or the civet cat. So how did perfumers find that? I always tell my clients, perfumers travel the oceans, the cities, the forests. They're always looking for interesting ingredients. And musk comes from the deer, also the civet, yes, from the deer and the civet cat. But they get a little sexually aroused. They sort of make certain secretions. So how or why those perfumers found those secretions, we're not going to go there. But certain ingredients are no longer being able to be used. So again, a musk was so in the 60s. I mean, that's all you smelled was musk. And now today you don't smell it as much for several reasons. It's not as heavy, it's not as popular. You can't get real musk anymore because it's been banned. So that's sort of one of the reasons.
We are at the end of the hour, but there are so many questions. So I'm going to keep going. And
Okay.
those who, need to sign off, this will be available to be replayed so you can catch, the last few questions. But I wanted to follow up on that specific topic because so many people have these favorites, but it's not being, sold anymore. And they wanted to ask you, Sue, if there is a better way of storing these perfume that they can no longer buy, and is there a time limit to
Yes.
use these perfume bottles?
By the way, great questions. And as I'm listening to Angela ask you, I'm sort of flipping through the comments and the questions, and they're beautiful questions. And thank you all for really taking up my sort of quest for you to ask questions in the chat and tell me what you think about these fragrances. So I'm going to try and get to them also with Angela's help. So how to store fragrance? Well, fragrance, I would say, is like great white or great wine. Beautiful wines are stored in vats, and they're stored in temperature controlled fridges or rooms, because the ingredients are so special and are so sensitive to light, to cold, to temperatures. And so fragrances too. And I would never recommend storing fragrance in a bathroom that gets overheated with the steam, because first of all, it's going to distort the fragrance. And if the fragrance isn't well secured, if you use the fragrance every day, so the cap lifts off and it gets oxidized, it's going to distort the fragrance. The other thing is, I don't ever believe in putting fragrance in a fridge, because fragrances are not meant to be cold, they're meant to be room temperature. So I would say store fragrance even on your dressing room, away from direct sunlight, away from your temperature, your air conditioning or your heating. Put it on a lovely tray on a dressing table, away from the direct light, away from cold, away from heat, and it'll last. And I have actually got fragrances, believe it or not, when I was at Elizabeth Arden, one of the first products that my boss, Joe Ronchetti, gave me as a welcome to be the training director was the beautiful 2-ounce bottle of Chloe perfume, the original Chloe perfume with the calla lilies. I've had it for, I won't tell you how long, but almost 40 years. I don't really use it because it's such a beautiful collectible, but every now and again I'll untwist it and I'll smell it, and it's just beautiful. So it's lasted that long, but I haven't worn it and I haven't really had it exposed to direct sunlight. So I would say store your fragrances in a way that is going to help protect them, that you can still enjoy them, but don't expose them to direct light and temperatures. I would say that fragrances, if you do it that way, can last you up to say 4 or 5 years. If you see the color changing, it gets a little oxidized. Maybe the fragrance was a lovely golden hue to start with, and now it's sort of turning into almost like a rum color, you know that it's being distorted.
Mm. So you've smelled so many different fragrances from all over the world. And as a fragrant expert, this is probably the most asked question for you. They want to know your own personal 3 top fragrances, 3 top scents that you've either created or that you have come across.
Oh my God, you're asking me to name my children. Well, okay, so this is probably a little bit showing you my age, because there are some magnificent, magnificent fragrances that I will tell you about, ones that I haven't created, that I just feel are so reflect quality and a feeling of luxury and a feeling of positivity and confidence. So one that I love is Mitsuko, which is beautiful. I think it's been changed again. It's by Guerlain, and it's a beautiful fragrance, which I think is magnificent. And that is like a spicy floral. The next fragrance that I really loved was a Chypre, getting back to Chypre, was Cabochard by Madame Gray. How many of you remember, and it's okay, you can put it in the chat, it's a very sort of wonderful fragrance, Cabochard by Madame Gray. And it's a deep, sensual, patchouli, Chypre fragrance with oak moss. I mean, it's just gorgeous, but also very, very, I think, for a sophisticated time of day. It's a sophisticated night. It's certainly a fragrance that you want to wear with a loved one and so on. It's not one of those fresh, fruity ones. Now, somebody, Josephine, just talked about the scent of freshly mown green grass. Vent Vert comes closest to me, Spa d'Almant. So I love that whole category. Believe it or not, Cabochard then came up with a fragrance called Cabotine, which is a beautiful, fresh, sort of green fragrance, a green floral. Beautiful. And I agree with you, Josephine. Yes, the scent of freshly mown green grass. I have a beautiful blend called Green, my sort of sparkling green. It is the scent of freshly mown cut green grass, a scent of green leaves with a little bit of hyacinth. So it gives it a little bit of that freshness and that sweetness. So, and then the other one that I love, let's see, Mitsuko, Cabochard, Cabotine, and some modern ones. I like my fragrances a lot.
I think we all do. I'm so excited also to talk a little bit about your fragrances. Let me ask one thing, because someone is asking this, and I want to show you. So when people put perfume, they spritz it on their wrist. Sometimes they rub it, sometimes they smash it. Is that a no-no, or is that okay?
Yes,
too?
it's a no-no.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, and I'll get to the Jiki question from Terry. Jiki also, I think Jiki also comes in one of those magnificent classic fragrances, which are just, the Guerlain fragrances were beautiful. Some of the newer ones, again, are a little bit more synthetics, but they try and maintain the quality. But I would say Mitsuko and Jiki are beautiful. So getting back to Angela's question, so why do people spray on the wrist and then rub it like crazy, like you're trying to out damn spot? Why do you do that? There's no reason to. Because if a fragrance is made with beautiful natural ingredients, you don't want to distort that with the oils from your skin. So you just have to spray the fragrance, and actually just, if you want to, just let it air dry. Just wave your arm around, and please don't do that, because it's really going to crush the beautiful molecules of the fragrance. You don't have to do that. So spray one there and one there, and then you'll be okay. Some people also do it and put it on their neck like that. You can be lavish with your fragrance, because you can always get another bottle.
So let's talk a little bit about the scents that you create. We have a question that is asking how you mix scents for your clients.
So thank you for that question. By the way, these questions are amazing. I think we have 81 new messages. So thank you all for writing. And I'm looking at the categories: the floral and spicy, fresh and woodsy. Yes, and floral and fresh, spicy, fresh herbs, and some spicy lavender, lemongrass, vanilla. Beautiful. Sorry, I'm just so captivated by these questions, Angela. So I actually, when I left Tiffany and I left the corporate world to have my daughter, and then 2008 happened, the economy crashed, and the consulting had dried up. And I decided to take my knowledge and start to think about creating a bespoke customization initiative. And because by this stage I had learned about the different notes and the different sort of categories, the fresh, the floral, woodsy, spicy, and all the ingredients, I wanted to come up with a wonderful way that was affordable and easy, but still quality and luxurious. Now, why do I say that? Because the idea of bespoke perfumes was originally only really the area of nobility, royalty, or the very, very wealthy celebrities who wanted something for themselves. And, the idea of starting a fragrance from fresh, literally cultivating the ingredients, finding them, harvesting them, formulating them, and then testing them again and again, could take a year or 2 or 3 or 4, and can literally cost thousands and thousands. That's why it was for the nobility or the very wealthy or royalty or whatever. And I wanted to come up with a way that was still affordable, but still luxurious. And so I created my 18 perfume blends, which span the entire olfactive palette: the citrus, the green, the ozonic, the aldehydic, which is the Chanel No. 5, the herbaceous notes, the different florals, the fresh floral, the rose, I've got a beautiful exotic rose floral, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the different flowers and 18 different blends, and it took about 2 or 3 years for me to create them. And once I have them, they're really beautiful, they're great quality. And the beauty about what we do is you can choose each of the 18, and then what we say is, narrow, you can take 1 or combine 2 or combine 3 or up to 4. The more you combine, the less distinctive it comes, and the more sort of soupy it becomes. So you want your fragrance to be distinctive. So the idea is you take the fragrance journey, you evaluate the fragrances, you select 3 or 4 that you love, and that becomes your fragrance. And the beauty about my fragrances is that each one is a beautiful, distinctive fragrance, and it can be combined. So there's no bad combination. So that's how we sort of come to work with our clients and create a fragrance for them. And it's great for men and for women.
Well, so what is also very notable is your career, and I think it's been inspiring for a lot of the audience members. There's a question that's asking for your advice on on what should someone do to begin their career in fragrance.
Well, that's a lovely question. So I don't know where this person is, but there are certain colleges like FIT that offers a fragrance class. I was actually the adjunct professor there. Also at LIM College, I taught there. I think the New School offers one too. If you are at a point where you don't want to go back to school and you just want to learn, there are so many tutorials online. There are so many, as I said earlier, there are so many thousands of fragrances being launched because everybody today is a brand. Everybody's on YouTube, social media. So, you can do it. And then I think once you have sort of studied that and you're interested in it, I'd be happy to talk to you if you wanted to come and make an appointment. I'm always happy to make appointments. I've moved into a beautiful pop-up boutique. I had my fragrance studio downtown in Tribeca for 8 years. I called it the Scenterprises. And it was so great because it was like a little oasis in the heart of, New York, down in Tribeca, and you came down these sort of dinky, winky little steps, and suddenly it became this beautiful oasis of perfume and music and all my mother's artwork. And it was just a beautiful sort of space. And then I had to leave at the end of July last year because the pandemic happened and then the owners were selling the building. And so I'm in a wonderful situation now. I don't know how many of you have heard of Vanessa Noel. She's a fantastic shoe designer. And I've known her, and she has this beautiful shoe boutique on 64th and 3rd, between 3rd and next. And this is where I am. I have my beautiful perfume boutique here, and I'm so happy and grateful to Vanessa. And we just actually have collaborated on the first Noel Shoe Museum perfume for her shoe museum, which she's launching and opening the first shoe museum in America. And so this is the Noel Shoe Museum packaging. Oh, it's hard to see, I guess, with the screen. But, we actually do see clients by appointment and socially distancing, even though we do smell the fragrances, evaluate them. We sit 6 feet apart or more, and people can take off their mask as they're evaluating fragrances. But, I think there are so many companies offering fragrances. Sometimes I've heard of people going to buying certain fragrances that sadly haven't really helped them, and they either haven't shown up or they aren't quality fragrances. So if you want any help or advice, please feel free to contact me.
We saw in your presentation, there were these categories that were very popular for certain decades.
Yes.
So our final question for you is, what do you predict will be the fragrance style for 2020? If we were to put a slide in there for the decade for 2020, what do you predict will be the fragrance style?
I think it's less about a fragrance style. It's more about how fragrance reflects your individuality. And I really think that having done this now for 12 years on the custom fragrance business, it's more about feeling confident, feeling understanding your individuality and projecting a feeling of, this is me, I'm confident, I'm wearing a fragrance that makes me feel amazing. And I don't care if it's a floral or a citrus or a woodsy or spicy, whatever that category is, that is not sort of the popular category du jour. If spices du jour of the 1980s or the florals were, it doesn't matter as long as a fragrance reflects who you are. And I really feel that today it's all about being confident, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to feel good about themselves, pamper themselves, particularly during this dreadful time that we've all been through. So if you can wear a fragrance that you say, oh, I love this, but it's not the popular time, it's not a floral, and the florals are so important. And, I happen to love rose, but some people think rose is so old fashioned, reminds you of my grandmother. But if you love rose and you think it really makes you feel wonderful, then wear rose. Now, there are some roses, with all due respect, that can be a little heavy and a little old-fashioned, but you have to find the rose that is a little bit more modern, that reflects you, and that makes you feel good. I think honestly, it's all about feeling good. I don't think there are any rules right now. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think because of what's happened online, social media, YouTube, Pinterest, all these internet apps, we're able to be who we are. Look, we're Zooming. Who thought that Zoom would be a way that we would all be interacting? And even when you wear Zoom, you want to feel good, you want to look good. So, and you want to smell good.
Well, I think that's a fantastic, very good prediction, fantastic prediction, and also very inspiring. We are at the end of our program. Thank you
Oh,
so much for joining us today, Sue. What a pleasure it is to talk to you. I want to remind our audience that if you're interested in Sue's book, The Power of Perfume, How to Choose It, Wear It, and Enjoy It, the link to pre-order this is in the chat box. If you're interested in any of the other programs presented by the National Arts Club, you can visit our YouTube channel. You can also go to nationalartsclub.org. I am Angela Louie. This is Sue Phillips, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for your wonderful questions and for paying such wonderful attention. And I hope to hear from you. Thank you. Angela, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Valentine's Day.